This episode is sponsored by Arana Stay, the digital guest guide of the future. Say goodbye to the hassle of traditional welcome packs and say hello to a seamless and unforgettable digital experience for your guest with Arana's fully branded guest experience app. Boost your revenue with powerful features and focus on what you do best, whilst Arana Stay takes care of the rest. Visit aranastay.com to find out more. Okay, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Accommodation Show. This week, I'm joined by the wonderful, fantastic Melissa Kalan to the show. Welcome.
Thank you, Bart. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
We've been trying to tee this interview up for a little while, and I've been super excited about it because we will be talking about all things revenue management. And I would call you the revenue management queen because you are the leader of ARMA, which is the Australian Revenue Management Association. You are putting on an unbelievable conference called Unstoppable, which you've been doing for a little while. You're someone that I met at No Vacancy, which was an event a little while ago, and you just have a great depth of knowledge about our industry, but also about revenue management. So I'm excited. I'm really excited to get stuck into talking about revenue management. But before we get going, I would love you. I've read your bio, but I think you might be able to sort of give people a bit of an introduction as to who you are, what you do with ARMA, but also a little bit of your history and how you got to where you are.
Perfect. No, I'd be happy to. Thank you for that intro as well. So look, I lead the Australian Revenue Management Association. I'm one of the company directors. I was founded the company about 11 years ago now, and really it was set up to champion the discipline of revenue management because I just know how valuable it is to business. And the actual association really is a professional association that has a core focus on upskilling the industry. And we have professional certifications. We run events like the summit, which you mentioned, and provide networking opportunities and resources for the industry. So that came about because my original background was in the hotel industry. I started off in a hospitality traineeship and worked for the Ritz-Carlton Hotel Group. And I was at the right place, right time, and was introduced to this discipline of revenue management and fell in love with it. It was like a light bulb moment where I just couldn't believe the way we were sort of approaching business and managing our inventory prior to having this knowledge. And I just found my niche and my space and have stayed in that ever since. I went and spent some time at Qantas to broaden my skills, and you know, the idea was for me to always come back in a role where I could help educate and upskill the broader industry that really at the time didn't have access to any education in this space. Some did. The five-star sort of brands and larger chains had a lot of support from their American corporate offices, a lot of them, but the broader industry really didn't. And the goal was to provide e-learning and professional certifications online as well, so we could reach the broader industry much quicker. And that's how that came about. And 11 years later, here we are. We've done 8 summits as well. This is its 8th year, and it's always really well received by the industry. And look, it's a great industry, and it's forever changing, and I just constantly have to keep abreast of, you know, the trends and technological changes and everything that's happening in that space.
What a fantastic segue into our topic for today. So today we're going to be talking about trends and technology, and I guess going to an event like Unstoppable, this is where you get to sort of share and learn. I'm sure that you yourself, you go to these events, you organize these events to get the latest information from people that are out there on the coalface, actually dealing with these different issues and understanding revenue management, particularly because there's so much turbulence out there, and it feels like it's always turbulent, right? So be it COVID, be it inflation, be it wars, there's always these things going, and therefore the skill set around revenue management is more important than ever.
Yes, well, we did. We have lost quite a lot of talent, that succession pipeline of people in the industry, sadly, as a impact of the last few years. But I mean, the discipline itself and the skills, it's always been of value. But certainly, when people are impacted with the revenue losses and impacted financially, sadly, like many operators have been through the pandemic years, there has been a renewed I suppose a shift in focus of, recouping those losses and making money is at the forefront. And making money always has been, but once you actually hit financially and you see the losses that can occur, and then there's that real extra need and desire to make more out of what you've got, to find move the needle, I suppose, if you want to use that term, as much as you can, to every single dollar counts. And that's where I think this big shift has turned more onto the discipline of revenue and yield management as well, and upskilling their people and investing in them to make sure that they are at the forefront of it. So
yeah, I guess that's a fascinating one, because you've got tenure in this space and you've been doing these conferences for quite a while, and you see how things are actually changing and how organizations are bringing in, I guess, basic revenue management principles, but there's also, I would say, revenue management philosophy as well. And that's from having different guests on the podcast, and you'll have completely differing points of view as to how one should manage one's revenue and, not race to the bottom and that sort of thing. The first question I would have is, in terms of where things were 10 years ago and where they are now in terms of skill set, because there's some people that have or within their organizations that say, yeah, we've got revenue management under control, and some would say, oh yeah, we know about it, but we're not doing it well enough. Would you have a gut feel as to sort of, one, how it's changed, and now how good organizations are at their revenue management?
Sure. It's really come a long way over the last 10 years, and that's been really pleasing to see. A lot of the people that the value of the discipline has really increased in terms of their worth to the organisation and their standing in the organisation. So we've seen a lot of skilled revenue managers, from being perceived as, just data analysts and poring over data, to really being part of the broader commercial leadership teams now in organisations, and also taking the lead of the commercial teams, which is really, a great step, and also moving into general manager and more senior corporate level roles in companies. And I think the value of, especially when they're good communicators and good leaders, the value of their insights they can derive from the data. And sometimes it just takes a small tweak to get some great top line revenue uplift. So I think they've really earned their seat at the table now, and we are certainly seeing the rise of commercial leaders more that have come from the revenue management side of business as opposed to the operations side.
Yeah, yes. I think you see that as a whole, as that people that have really, really good grasp of the numbers can do very well within an organization in terms of overall leadership and strategic thinking, because you're thinking outside the box rather than seeing what you can see right in front of you. You've got a much bigger piece of the puzzle that you're actually looking at.
Correct. And I think where the skill set of revenue managers and good ones is the context that they bring to the data. So it's, there's a lot of data that people can have access to, and that can be a good thing. It can be a bad thing at times, but a good revenue manager, the skill set they have is being able to know when to react and when not to react, and adding the layers of context required before just quickly reacting to a decision off one data set or one number. Context is very important.
Yeah, and look, I definitely want to move into sort of trends and technology and that sort of thing, and talk about the conference. But before we go there, I do want to address, so one of the biggest emerging sectors within the accommodation industry is short-term rentals, vacation rentals. All the OTAs are speaking about it. That's where they see their biggest opportunity for growth. and revenue management as well. There's a plethora of different tools that are being developed to help manage pricing, sort of dynamic pricing tools, and that sort of technology that sits behind it. But
Yes.
there's this, there's actually a real lack of education in terms of the sort of revenue management side, like what kind of rules should I have, and when should I apply different triggers? How do I use that data? And a lot of these tools will automate it for you, but as you and I will well know, that you need to understand your business. The tool isn't really going to understand what you're dealing with, and particularly with short-term rentals, where it's not like a hotel where we've got 100 rooms or 50 rooms or 1,000 rooms. We've got a disparate portfolio all over the place with different properties.
Yes.
You can imagine that, like, I see short-term rentals as a truly emerging class, right? Like, people say, oh, it's been around forever. No, well, not the way that it is right now. It's changing really fast and professionalizing. You've got property managers. So you've got the property managers who will probably be sitting there and have some grasp of revenue management, but I'd say that they're probably back to where the hotel industry might have been in the past. Do you see it in the same way or differently?
Yes, look, I mean, that would be my sort of broad, I guess, more generalized view of it. With it was pretty much always perceived there was the airlines and the hotels, came into place. And now over the last 10 years, I've seen it really become at the forefront, say in the holiday park sector. And now I would say the short-term rental market is really starting to become more aware of the value that this discipline can bring. And I think the key is it's understanding all the elements and the moving parts that make up the discipline, and different operators have to take and apply parts of it and tweak it to their own nuances within their own businesses. So apartments are a bit different to your traditional, say, hotel model, and then holiday parks have their own different elements, I suppose, that they have to tweak and apply things slightly differently. But underpinning it is, it's essentially the core, the same, what we're all trying to achieve. It's just that it has to be tweaked depending on the different business models. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity in the short-term rental market to certainly apply elements of this, certainly from that dynamic pricing piece, like you've just mentioned. Once they understand and can shift away, like from the static pricing concept to understanding why and the value that dynamic pricing brings and how to do that effectively, then they can really see some, business growth.
Yeah, and like as we were saying, I mean, that's literally where revenue management, the history of it was like saying, hey, let's prove the value of actually having dynamic pricing. Let's prove the value of all these things, and people go, oh, hold on a second, we can actually improve our bottom line by having 8% quite simply by having some good strategy around it. Now, I'm going to move back to the sort of trends in technology, because I believe that Unstoppable wasn't hosted last year, but correct me if I'm wrong. There's been a bit of a gap, and I'd love to get your thoughts on what we can expect to sort of learn nowadays. Where is the industry at? And I imagine it was kind of like pre-COVID to now to post-COVID. What are you seeing?
Well, we brought it back in person this May last year, and we titled it then "Let's Get On With It," because we wanted to just start moving
Very
forward.
Australian.
And and then prior to that, we did run it 2 years virtual. So it was a bit of a rebuild again, although it was still well received by the industry. We did move it to Sydney, and it was previously held in Melbourne. And it will be in Sydney again this year. So this year, I think the great thing with this program is that it is the whole 2 days, and we can do a 2-day program because there's always so much to talk about and learn. But all of the topics are targeted specifically to revenue management, and all of the people there are people that are they just absorb this information and they can't get enough of it. So 2 days can pass at this conference, and I've had people say they wish it would go longer. So that's always good feedback as well, but the topics resonate. But this year I think it's heavily dominated by, not heavily dominated, but there's certainly the AI focus and the digital tools that are, there's always an emerging digital tools that will have use for business and becoming more efficient and with automation as well. So that's kind of a bit of a flavor of this theme, but we always have, the direct booking topics, and also the industry pain points around rogue sites popping up that are sort of, scraping their rates and selling their businesses without them sort of knowing about it, and lots of different industry pain points like that resonate across all operators, even in the short-term rental market or the traditional accommodation space as well. And costs, understanding distribution costs as well is a big one, and market share, and I think ownership, like not ownership of the customer, but trust as well, in terms of persuasive nudges and things, and all that psychological element of pricing techniques that is something that industry has been a bit behind on as well, and the OTAs are very good at it. That's a whole nother piece that really can add a lot of value to your conversions and your business growth as well.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting as well is to see how much chatter there is around sort of inflationary pressures as well.
There's that, absolutely. Yes, sorry to jump in there, but that just prompted me because I think there's so many forces that we've obviously coming through the pandemic, and business is, coming back at this stage, but I think we have to brace for more bumps along the way, and some of those bumps are the pressures of inflation, increased costs of living, and how does that affect your segmentation and then customer spend? And whilst it might maybe look good in the mid to short term, what's it going to look more longer term? And that is a key piece over my years dealing with the industry, is making sure that we always have, as far out as possible on our radar as well, because often if you're looking at it often enough, that's when you can start to see red flags, and the sooner you can see red flags, then obviously the quicker you can react and make changes that are necessary.
Yeah, it's interesting. So if you talk about, just basic like sort of dynamic pricing, I remember having Les Morgan on the show, and we were talking about inflation. It must have been a year ago now, and we were talking about how he saw the need to have dynamic pricing within the restaurant. So, as the cost of a tomato goes up, all of a sudden you've got to change all your menus, and you've got to figure out what you're doing and how you're pricing things, because it's just such a dramatic difference that things make in terms of your cost base.
Yes.
But also, now you're going to have issues with consumer demand as well, which are going to change, and people's appetite for different offerings will change. I went out the other day and spent $19 for a pint of beer, which in my view is completely unsustainable. So there's all these elements that are changing all the time, and knowing how to adjust and how to pivot and how to be nimble, right? Are we a nimble organization that can actually make these changes when we need to? I think that's going to be super important. A discussion I'd like to hear a lot about, and say, hey, what are people actually doing, and how are you preparing for this? Like, I think that with COVID, it was almost like, all right, we're all shut down. We've got a clear path of, hey, nothing's happening, right? Let's figure it out. Well, still, we don't really know. It's a month-on-month basis. You read the papers. The papers are pretty crap. In my view, they're not great at actually giving you good information that you can use. What do you reckon?
I think it's exciting to see the rebound in travel that we're seeing, but I think it's naive to just think that great, we're just going to keep surging forward now as things used to be. There are still certainly a lot of external pressures on the demand that changes the sort of traditional way we're used to pre-pandemic. We're seeing that just with day of week changes, even in demand, like where Sunday used to be quite quiet, and now that's picked up a bit because people are trying to avoid, delays with flight schedules and things like that for a Monday. So they'll travel maybe earlier on a Sunday to get in, whereas a Friday, which used to be busy, isn't as busy. This is general. Obviously in different pockets and different sectors and different segments, it can be a bit different. But if I touch on, say, the corporate segment, for example, and a lot of our, say, city hotels rely heavily on that corporate demand, and they've had that forced change. There's pressures on reducing carbon footprints and the sustainability piece, which can impact the corporate travel, and companies have gotten used to servicing their clients virtually. So I think there definitely has to be a focus on not resting on your laurels as such, and yes, being excited that there is this rebound of travel, but not just assuming that it's just going to it's not going to still have bumps along the way, because there are things that are going to keep challenging it. And you have to really be across your numbers and constantly look at the data. And like I said, as far out as you can as possible to try and pick up any red flags.
Yeah, and I wonder as well whether there's going to be a need to relook at the data points that we're actually collecting. I think that, really understanding our customers and where they're coming from and why they're coming and how long they're staying and those things. I think that there's a lot of assumption that's being put into the equation as to why people are traveling. And I think that's going to dramatically change. I'll give you an example. Working from home has obviously been a huge thing over the pandemic, and a lot of people now do work from home, but also now there's been a pushback against that from organizations and CEOs saying, hey, you should actually probably come to work and do some work rather than not work when you're supposedly working at home. And not my words, that's what they're saying.
Yes.
So that push to get back into the office is to ensure productivity, right? When you get tools like ChatGPT, which I'll actually be talking about when we're there, is they improve efficiency to such a level that now we should get more output from our employees by tenfold or 20-fold. So therefore, it's not that you're doing the job that you were doing before, now you're doing a lot more. What I'm getting at is there's this kind of call to get people back into the office, and things are changing once again. And we need to make sure that we're getting those data points so we know why people are actually traveling, whether it's still okay to do business just virtually, or whether those expectations are coming back to, hey, hold on, we do need to meet face to face and shake each other's hands, as opposed to how it used to be. So data points is kind of something that I think would be quite interesting to see what people are doing.
That's right, because the whole remote piece and flexible or hybrid arrangement, it's a bit like a Pandora's box that, once it's sort of, is it that the word, it's or the genie's out of the bottle. Once it's out, it's hard to sort of rein it back in once people know it's possible. For example, I just think back to my airline days. Even at the time, they weren't really even open to what could have been done remotely back then. Just wasn't really something that was done or thought of as a possibility. And then we've seen the airlines operating, even though the borders got shut, but where they could put flights on, they were operating domestically, the operation out of their homes. So like the whole airlines were being run out of people's homes. So it can be done, and we've seen it get done, but certainly there's a lot of challenges for businesses as well. And like you said, you've got to really be able to measure. It is about the productivity, but putting the right measurements in place for that is possibly a challenge for some businesses. But also there's that other flip side of the chat by the water cooler and the culture of the organization, and I don't have all the answers for it, but I just know that it is there's a lot of benefits, and then there's a lot of challenges with it as well. And yes, a whole data piece around that would really have to be looked at, is to the productivity expectations. I will mention just one thing on that though, is one downside. Say we had a sales manager one time that had quite an aggressive approach, but because they're not in the office and you're not picking up or seeing or just observing that behavior, sometimes whilst the sales looked like they were coming in, it wasn't until the repeat business started dropping off, or the sentiment that you got from customers and feedback, that's how we sort of were able to identify and speak to close contacts and get feedback. But that wasn't something that was so apparent initially, because you weren't able to observe the person's behavior in the office on a regular basis and hearing client conversations and things like that. So that's just a side piece and a challenge, but there are benefits to it. But there's certainly a lot of difficulties for business leaders as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, sort of applying that sort of thinking to revenue management, I really feel that Our customer demographic is going to change. It really is, and we need to pay attention to it, and we need to think about what's actually happening within our business, and is it what we think it is? Because we, like you said, we've kind of set this pattern. Oh, people are spending more, and they're doing this, they're traveling in this particular way. Once international travelers are back, it's going to be X, Y, and Z, which I don't think it's going to be. I think everyone that used to travel, everyone's got a bit older, different needs, got families now. I think it's all going to be quite an interesting one for a lot of businesses to tackle and to deal with.
Yes, and I do think we all know reviews are really powerful, but I think they're a real, even more so, reviews make up part of the whole revenue management piece because it influences the perception of a property, which influences the demand, and it also influences the pricing. So online review scores are a very powerful piece of the whole revenue and yield management discipline. But I've noticed, just doing a little look myself recently online, that I find, value for money was something that was dipping down on some properties that I wouldn't have expected it to be at, certainly in that 5-star bracket as well. And I just think it's really important for all operators, no matter what star rating you are or what level you are, that you have to really you have to look at the reviews, because people's expectations are changing as well. And just making sure that when they're screaming out, they think that you're lacking value for money. I think, you need to look at it and pay attention.
Wow. Look, I feel that these are conversations that we could have for days, and luckily we've got a couple of days coming up where we will be able to have these conversations with each other and with our peers. Excuse me. Tell me a little bit more about Unstoppable, what's happening, what people can expect from that event.
Great. So the unique thing about our conference is, as I touched on before, that it is 2 days and all of the topics are focused on strategies that can help drive business growth. We do, it's very much an education conference, 2 days, and the fact that everybody there is all like-minded professionals, the buzz of the summit is really exciting, and it's something that a lot of people talk about after the event, because it's just been in a room full of like-minded people, all lapping up that content is really nice to see. We try to actually mix the delegates up a lot, so they don't just sit in a sort of main ballroom style room listening to death by PowerPoint endlessly for 2 days. We mix them up into Genius Zone sessions, which are small discussion hubs, so it gives them a chance to ask questions as well, where they feel more comfortable to do that rather than in a main plenary style room. We also have some commercial workshops where we focus on a whole lot of different topics around their distribution, around how to sell smarter is one of the topics, say, for this conference. And this year we are focusing, or we have an expert piece on ESG as well, because I think that is something getting talked about and loosely touched on in some of the conferences, but there's still an underpinning, a lack of knowledge really, in terms of just the depth of what that needs to go to, perhaps, and what that means from a revenue generation perspective as well for business. Yeah. So we're talking about that as well. And of course, AI, and it's something we all just have to embrace and learn about how we can really utilize that well in our businesses as well. And from a revenue management standpoint, we've always had automated revenue management solutions around, which are fantastic for really, if you want to do revenue management really seriously. There are some really great tools out there that automate and churn the data for you and bring in data from a lot of sources and do a lot of your demand projections for you. But bringing in, machine learning and AI and all this element now is something that we're all trying to embrace and get up to speed with as quickly as possible. It's
going to be more and more important as the technology has got better and better at dealing with this sort of stuff as well.
Exactly.
Awesome. So this is a 2-day event, which is happening, and that's happening on May the
23, and 24. That's 24th.
Right. Beautiful. So folks, if you do want to check it out, then make sure you look into the show notes. And I believe that there may be a little bit of a special offer for those from the accommodation show as well. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
Awesome. So check out that link and you will get yourself a bit of a special if you do want to attend. But make sure that you get onto it quick, because we do not guarantee that offer will be going forever or for the whole up until the event. So make sure you get on, check out the terms and conditions, and get yourself a ticket. Is there anything else that we need to cover off, Melissa, or are we pretty good?
I think we're pretty good. There's lots of things I could cover off, but I will just leave one tip in terms of, I do see it written a lot now about the value of forecasting, and it's more important than ever. But I would just like to say that forecasting has always been important for business, and it is something though that is lacking out in the broader industry. And I think, you know, the skill set of good forecasters is still very, very valuable for business, and you know, it underpins the whole commercial strategy and the cost management side, and also the guest experience and satisfaction side as well, once your forecast accuracy is really ticking along nicely and as accurate as it can be. So forecasting is a large part of revenue and yield management, and in order to be able to determine your pricing, it all stems from that. So yeah, I just wanted to flag that I do see it's more important now than ever, but forecasting has always been important, and really people need to focus on it. Yes.
And look, there's just so many different, I guess from what I'm getting, there's so many different things that we can look at and focus on, and taking that time out to actually meet peers, talk about these different issues, and even maybe explore issues that we may not have thought of for a little while. That, oh, actually that one is more important than I envisaged. It's invaluable.
And that's where the summit is great, because it is once a year an opportunity to bring industry together from all sectors, and just having that conversation, like you mentioned, you know, running an idea past someone, or having the diverse opinions about something. It's all really important to have those discussions, and that's where the summit keeps that alive in the industry and thriving.
And what I like about the events myself is getting to know people that are your peers, that you could potentially call in the future and say, hey, I've got this problem, I've got this issue, and how would you deal with it? I think that's incredibly invaluable.
Correct.
It really is. All right, folks, I'm going to wrap it there. Thank you so much, Melissa. If you did enjoy the episode, then make sure you give us a like, a follow, and a subscribe. Leave us a review on Google. We want to know whether you'll be attending this event and whether you are doing revenue management in your business and how valuable you think it actually is. Melissa, thank you so much once again. I do sincerely appreciate you, and I'm looking forward to presenting at the event in a few weeks' time.
Yes, thank you, Bart. Thanks for having me speak to your audience today. And yes, we can't wait to have you in person this year at Unstoppable, and have you share all your amazing insights with our audience as well. So thanks again.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Have a good day.